I'm Heath Lambert, and you're listening to Marked by Grace, a podcast applying the grace of Jesus to all of life. Welcome to the week of May 27th, and welcome to Marked by Grace. This week, I'm answering your question, how do I relate to my gay son's adopted child? It is a sensitive and a complicated question, but I am happy to try and answer any question you ask, and you can send your questions in to markedbygrace@fbcjax.com. That's markedbygrace@fbcjax.com. This week, the question that I'm taking actually comes in a much larger context. They've made clear that this is a follow-up to the podcast from September the 12th, 2022, where I was talking about attendance, whether you should attend a same-sex wedding. And this is following up on that. And there's a lot of questions about, okay, so I've got somebody, I've got a relative, got a child, that marriage has already happened. They're already living their life together. And there's just a list of questions about how do I engage with all of that. I don't have time in a podcast that we try to keep as brief as Marked by Grace to take all of those in one shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just picking out one of the questions, and we'll save the others for another time. And I'm picking one of the most delicate ones. How do I relate to my gay son's adopted child? So my son is a homosexual. He is in a relationship, marriage or otherwise, with another man, and now they have brought a child into their home. There's all sorts of ways that this could happen. It could happen through surrogacy. It could happen through adoption. But it is creating a difficulty for this person and who's asking the question, and it might be creating a difficulty for you. And as Christians, this is something that we need to think about in the world we're living in, because I think we can anticipate that this is going to be something that's an increasing challenge for us as it becomes increasingly common. Now, the first thing I want to say on the way to answering the question is to acknowledge why this is complicated. And it's complicated because of something that I've talked about on Marked by Grace before, and it has to do with the ethical principle of the separation of the goods. So let me explain this for a minute. Biblically, everything good comes together. Everything good is united. And you actually see this very, very clearly in biblical marriage. So, in biblical marriage, think about everything good about it, but that must come together. So, in order for biblical marriage to be good and in order for biblical family to be good, you have to have one man and one woman in the context of one marriage for one life. And in that context, that is where we celebrate and enjoy the sexual relationship. It is the overflow of that sexual relationship where children are produced, and those children grow up in a home where mom and dad are together and they love one another. It is in that context that the extended family starts to work well, when these individual family units are healthy and you extend them out to other family units, that works well. It is the unity of the goods. And things start to get bad and things start to get complicated when we separate those goods. So there's all sorts of ways now, I want you to hear me say, there's all sorts of ways to separate the goods within biblical marriage and in biblical family. You can do that through divorce. Divorce brings a separation in those goods. This couple's supposed to be together, and divorce brings it into that. You can do it through death. Nobody has to be to blame for anything, but you have a very happy family, and when someone dies, when a mom or a dad or a child dies, that is going to bring pain into the life of that family. Why? Because the goods are being separated. You can separate the goods with conflict with in-laws. If you've got a controlling mother-in-law or a controlling father-in-law, and they won't embrace the thriving and the independence of the new family unit, that's going to create a lot of trouble. Why? Because we've got separation in the goods. This is a biblical principle, and what we need to understand is that in a sinful world, there's always some sort of separation of the goods, and that is one of the reasons for sin in the first place. So this question, how do I relate to my gay son's adopted child, is going to be complicated because there are so many goods that have been separated. I'm not trying to be controversial. I realize what I'm getting ready to say is controversial. I want you to know I'm not trying to be controversial. I'm trying to just speak about biblical truth. And this element of biblical truth wasn't controversial until really just a handful of years ago. But here are just some of the goods that are separated out when we're talking about the question we're dealing with. So first of all, you don't have a real marriage. Marriage is the union between one man and one woman. It is not the union between two men or two women. So our culture might call it marriage, but it's not marriage biblically defined by the Lord who created marriage. Also, the sexual relationship, which is supposed to happen exclusively in marriage and never between same sexes, that's another separation of the goods. Biologically, it is impossible. I think this used to go without saying, and it doesn't really go without saying anymore. But biologically, it's impossible for two men to have a child. It's impossible for two women to have a child. In order for a so-called same-sex union to have children, they have to borrow that behavior from somebody else. And so there's just a lot of separation of the goods, and that's why this is going to get complicated. This is very important. Because for the precious person who's asking this question and the precious people who are dealing with it, it's possible for you to get blamed for the complexity. Well, you won't accept us. You're not doing this the right way, and you're mean, and you're harsh, and you're fundamentalist, and you are against us. That's actually not what's happening at the fundamental level. At the fundamental level, we're dealing with a broken system that can't work, and it's not the fault of a Christian for being honest about that. So that's why this is complicated. But you didn't ask me this week to explain why it's complicated. You said I'm in this situation, and what do I do? So let me talk briefly about two problems, and then we'll be done. First, the first problem you've got is how you relate to this grandchild. Okay. We need to say that any objections you have to the homosexual lifestyle, to homosexual behavior, to so-called homosexual marriage, any objections that you have to that, and you should have many, any objections you have to that should not carry over to the adopted children of that so-called marriage. Is it right? No, it's not right. Are the goods separated? Yes, the goods are separated. Is it this child's fault? No. So the adopted child should bear as few consequences of this as possible insofar as it depends on us. And here's what that means. You have a call as a grandparent to love that child in every way possible. You have a call to love that grandchild in any way you can. Going to their sporting events, going to their recitals, having them over to your house, overflowing with gifts at birthdays and Christmas and just because, taking them to the park, telling them you love them, sharing with them your own Christian testimony, which gets tricky, but I'll just say, and this actually would be a whole other podcast, but for now, I'll just say it's possible for you to have a faithful Christian witness with this child without ever engaging in aggressive dissent that is going to create all sorts of difficulties. You can have a faithful Christian testimony as part of the overflow of your love in a way that works. So that's how you relate to the grandchild. Just you don't have to think any harder about it than that. Just I'm going to love this grandchild. I'm going to do everything I can to share and show love to this person. But that's only one problem, and it's probably not the most significant problem. The problem that is likely to be the most significant is whether you can relate to your grandchild. Here's the thing. It is a sad reality that many gay family members isolate themselves because of disagreement. Now, here's the thing. I'm not talking about, there's a way for Christians to sin against homosexuals in harshness and cruelty in the way they object. There's a way to do that. Again, that's another podcast for another day. But the presence of disagreement, the presence of dissent is not in and of itself harsh and unloving. And many people in homosexual relationships separate themselves from their Christian relatives because just the presence of dissent is more than they can bear. Now, I don't think this is necessary. What I urge people to do is to, as much as possible, to be able to make room in their relationships for love and not only the disagreement in principle. So you can say, hey, listen, I love you. I don't like the lifestyle you're living. It's not what I think is reflective of biblical truth or of God's design, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I don't want you in my life. It doesn't mean I don't want to see you and be involved with your family. I am going to acknowledge that you are living your life in a way that I don't think is best, but I'm still going to love you. And I wonder if it would be possible for you to acknowledge that I'm not living my life in a way that you think is best, but that you could still love me. And that's going to be complicated. It's going to be messy. It always is when the goods are separated. But I've seen this work, and it really can work. And so there's a conversation in the offing here of like, hey, guys, listen, you know where we are. You know what we think about this, but we love you. We love your kids. And can we just love each other? It actually would be possible for us to share a meal together, for us to spend time together, and not to have a knockdown drag out about these issues. So I'll say there's that conversation that might need to happen. I think the last thing I want to say as we wrap up this week. I want to give you an encouragement. As I was reading your questions, and as I singled out this question, my heart broke for this grandparent who is trying to do the best that is possible in this situation. They want to love the Lord. They want to love the Bible. They want to love their kids. They want to love their grandkids, and they just need some help. And you're feeling frustrated and overwhelmed. Let me tell you one story. I grew up in a home where the goods were very separated. I mean, there was a lot of separation of the goods in my family. There was divorce, there was adultery, there was liquor, there was harshness and abuse, and it was ugly. But one of the very few bright spots in my childhood, which turns out to be one of the brightest lights in my life, was my mama. My mama is not my biological mama, but she is the babysitter who started taking care of me and my twin brother when we were 2 weeks old. And after a couple years, she loved us so much that there was no more difference between me and my brother and her natural grandkids, and she stopped taking money, and we became part of the family. And Mama was a source of stability and love and peace in a childhood that was otherwise chaotic. When my mom would be on a drunken tear and couldn't drive or couldn't even walk, my mama would be there to show love and to show care. I actually don't remember ever a time in all of those years where my mama railed against my mom for being irresponsible or drunk. I don't actually ever remember hearing my mama ever say anything even unkind about my mom. She would say things, your mom's having a hard time, and we're just going We're going to take care of you guys and be here, and we'll go back home once it's safer to go home. And here's the thing, I'm telling you, I cannot possibly imagine the extent to which my mama shaped me. I'm telling you, she saved my life multiple times. I'm telling you, in large part, I am who I am today because of her love and investment in me. I had a home that was very, very broken, but I had a memo that was very, very stable and saved my life and shaped my life. And I will just encourage you while you're dealing with a hard situation that you have no idea that this precious child that you're talking about, one day when he is 44 years old, he very well could be saying, I am who I am today because of your investment in him. And I hope that is some encouragement for you in the midst of a difficult situation.